Hello my friends, and welcome to Brick Bending. Today we're going to be playing with a very interesting piece. And to be honest, when I first got them, I didn't think there was going to be anything interesting that I could do. I have had that experience multiple times, and almost every single time I am wrong. The series of builds that I'm going to show you today are ones that I've had sitting around my studio for quite a while now. I just wasn't quite sure what the appropriate way to demonstrate the use of these things was, but I think I have a rough grip now. So as part of this new set of process videos, I'm going to take you into that exploration process. And in my previous video about the Lego dodecahedron, that one was a pretty easy one to get into. I had one that I built in the past. It was fun to actually talk about it and show the old one, and building the new one was a grand adventure. But with these builds, there are a number of ways I could go about it. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started, and we'll stop and talk along the way. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the point of these process videos isn't necessarily to blow your mind out of the gate, but it is to take you on a journey. And if you've been around brick bending, you know that the Lego circle is a very old idea. It's a classic. And one of my favorite comments that I ever received on a video was, "Let me guess, another circle?" Which is very, very, very true. And I don't think I responded to the comment. But what I would say is, if you're getting tired of Legos forming a circle, then you're probably on the wrong channel. This is what I do. But the point of this exploration is not that this makes a circle. This is just where we're starting. So let's bring in the classic. So on the right, we have a classic Lego circle. It is 7 layers. 5 of those layers are bricks, and the top and bottom layers are plates. And to get that classic circle, you have to create a pattern that is essentially a staircase in 1x2s. And it is this fundamental brick bending technique that absolutely caught my attention in the early days. It's what started this whole crazy game, and it's true that I never get tired of it. And I have built a lot of circles with different bricks in the past, and they have different textures, and they're all really interesting. And this particular build has a circumference of 50 1x2s, and that's pretty standard. Sometimes I'll go down to 48, depending on what I'm trying to build, but 50 is a nice round number that makes me happy. Now, for this new build, I've actually done a circumference of 56. And part of that is because these bricks won't hold the same level of tension that a 1x2 will. And it's just part of how they're constructed. And I haven't really done the test to see how tight a circle I could create, but there is a method in this madness. And I will say that texture is just fascinating. Lots of shadows, lots of reflections. And if we flip it, we get an entirely different look. This is the other side of the inverted slope, and it has a very interesting look to it. Now, the main trick here is that normally you can't do a brick bending circle with 2x2s, and there's a pretty simple fundamental reason for that. Let's play with some 2x2 bricks for a minute, and we'll build that classic staircase pattern. And we'll only do 3 layers, not to belabor the point too much. And then by comparison, we'll bring in our inverted slopes. So with the 2x2s, they're locked in place. That extra layer of studs just makes this so there's a little bit of wiggle in it, but that is just the give of the plastic and a little bit of the gaps in between. And it's not even close to what a traditional 1x2 brick would give you. Versus the inverted slopes, where they're actually still only connected at the bottom by those 2 studs. So they're essentially a 1x2 at the bottom and a 2x2 at the top. And that gives you the classic play that you would expect with a 1x2, but with this interesting texture. But as I said before, the texture is just an added bonus. There's a whole lot more we're going to do with this. I dug through my very, very old portion of my collection and found a couple of really old circles. This one is at least 10 years old. Actually, all of them are at least 10 years old. And although I said you cannot make a circle out of 2x2 bricks, you can if you cheat a little bit. So inside, you can see that I'm doing the bending with a 1x2. And it's another 1x2 that's sitting on the outside that kind of fills in the space. So although it looks like a 2x2 circle, it's really not. And this fun one is also at least 10 years old. And one thing you can tell a little bit of is that the white bricks, they yellow over time. And so there's a slight ivory tone to some of these. And on the top, I just have these extra tall slopes. I'm still not great at the official terminology. And on the bottom are the same 2x2 inverted bricks that we are playing with today. But even 10 years ago, I scavenged together enough of these to make a interesting circle, and then it just went into the pile on a shelf in a back room somewhere. And lastly, this is the smallest Lego circle that I have ever made. It has a circumference of 36 1x2s, and that is just terrifyingly small. And the only reason this is possible is because I made this circle a few years ago out of an old brick bending art piece that I can't remember if I just decided I didn't like it anymore, or I took it apart. But when I tried to rebuild with it, one of the consequences of using this technique for long periods of time is that the bricks will give up a little bit. They'll lose some of their structural integrity. And if we pop this open, we'd probably find a few stress lines in there. But because they sat in a sculpture for a long time and they gave up a little bit, I was able to make a really tiny circle. None of these bricks are broken. They're just a little deformed from time, but it does make for a perfect little circle. So it's kind of a pre-aging, a pre-stressing of your bricks if you really want to build something crazy. Just takes you 10 years to prep. And the last thing I want to talk about before we get building on the next phase of this adventure is a very subtle distinction, and I don't know how well the camera is going to pick it up, but the piece on the left and the piece on the right are slightly different. And I actually went through a quiz with some of my family members to see if they could actually peg the difference. And what I did was I hid one of these inside of a pile of the other ones. I embedded it inside a long strip. And almost everybody did find it in the end. But the key difference here is that there appears to be a little bit of transparency in the plastic on the one on the right. And so what you get is just a slightly darker tone. Perhaps the dye in the plastic is a little different as well. But if you mix these two together kind of willy-nilly, you can see it. And so that was the first great setback in my initial prep for this, was figuring that out and deciding what to do with that difference. So we'll try to get a little closer here and see one brick versus the other. It's subtle, but I'm going to try to use it to my advantage. Okay, so another Lego circle. But what I love about this one is how just with the simple swap of orientation of the bricks, because these inverted slopes have chirality, they're left or right-handed, you just get a very, very clear picture of that staggering technique needed for the circle. You can see it in the original if you look closely, but it's so obvious when your circle's made of inverted slopes. And based on the color difference that we saw before, what I've done is all of the inverted slopes that are slightly darker, they are on the inside of the ring, and the lighter ones, the slightly transparent ones, are in the outside. Well, I mean, I guess ultimately they're on both sides, but the parts that are sticking out on the outside are light, and the parts that are sticking in on the inside are darker. And we'll see if that difference gets more and more noticeable as we go. So it's unlikely I'm going to keep any labored breathing in the final cut here, but needless to say, that is hard work. If you've ever tried to connect two circles together, they have to really perfectly align, and even then, it takes a lot of force. But you just get, well, not spirals, I say spirals, you get helices. Each of these is a perfect little helix. And if I understand my definitions correctly, because I have been corrected online, the spiral actually spirals outward. When it maintains its radius, it stays the same circumference, you get a helix. And again, the math terminology is not my favorite part of the game, but I try to get more and more accurate as I go. But we are not done. So the circle becomes a cylinder, and an interesting texture becomes a really interesting texture. So maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but the awesomeness factor on this has gone up a lot. You add this many layers, it is 15 layers on each side, and colors and textures, these are just cool. Although I will point out that I just noticed, move Caveman aside, I think you can see I put one slightly wrong color in the outer helices. And if you can't spot it, it's right there. So now the question is, do I rip this thing apart just to replace that one brick? Or do I leave that as a testament to imperfection? It is far more my style to do the former, but we'll see. We'll see how much that bothers me as we press forward. So, of course, we're not done. We're not even close. but I'm debating what the next best step should be. It's too bad the microphone can't pick up my thinking processes. All right, I think I have it. We'll come back in a sec. All right, my friends. So I'm not filming this in one sitting, and that gives me a chance to kind of think about things in between filming sessions. And I'm also not 100% decided on how often I should stop and talk versus just demonstrate. And I think now's the time to take a little pause and discuss all this crazy that I'm putting on the camera right now. So, one of the things that happened when I first built this textured circle out of these inverted slopes is that the little grooves that it makes became very obvious. And of course, then I had to put the grooves together. And so what I have in its very basic form is a wheel and a track. And what's kind of magic about that is they're perfectly suited. Like they just line up perfectly. So there's no shifting out. Like it is pretty much in line in that track. But that is only when you orient it in one direction. So let's flip. Turned around. Now, really doesn't want to roll very much. So I think a different construction of this technique will show you what is happening. So here are the the infinite lines of infinite 2x2 inverted slopes. And I have built a small version of that in the bright light orange. So this smaller subsection is exactly the same building technique, the same build as the lower medium Azure. So that is the very low friction sliding. So as you can see, it's really the smooth portion of that slope that is sliding against the edge of the bricks. But if I flip this around, now you can see the studs are actually bumping up against each other when you orient them in this direction. Really doesn't want to move that way. I think you get the point. I really could do this all day long. So we have a grooved Lego track, but of course that's not where we're going to stop. So just to quickly show you what's going on with my track here, growing up and letting it ride. Part of what I like to do is not overcomplicate things too much. So I knew I needed to prop this end up, and I just grabbed one other kind of piece. This is just all 2x4 plates in the same color. And one of the really cool things about this building technique, flip it on its side, so you can see it doesn't have a whole lot of give, you know, kind of up the direction I was going. And so that made the track quite stiff, which was nice. But in the other direction, it bends an awful lot. Let's see if we can make something fun out of this. So a very strange, bendy, medium Azure rainbow thing out of inverted 2x2 slopes. So not to confuse the builds too much, but you can see the medium Azure build here on my right. That is, I actually have not shown that so far. If you can believe that, that's an extra in the set of things that I have. And you know, here is the build we've been using on the track, largely. But when I first started working on this project, I didn't have all of the bright light orange pieces that I have now. So later on, I decided that I was going to have the two colors together. And so I actually have this extra medium Azure one. And I'm going to need that to make one of the things that come later a little bit bigger and more interesting. So I'm going to take it apart. And I thought I would capture that, because if you've not really wrestled with these bricks, like 1x2s making circles, sometimes you don't really understand the tension that's in them. So ripping this apart should be an interesting exercise. And I don't want to rip it apart arbitrarily. Like I want to reuse this pattern. So I'm just going to show you how that plays out. So I'm not going to claim to have some great expertise in ripping apart large Lego cylinders, because I really haven't done that much over the years. And there's a specific way that I want to try to get this off. I'd like to get it off in rings, but we'll see. So the first half of that went a lot more smoothly than I thought, but I really needed it in thirds. So now we reconstruct. So there are a lot of interesting and unique properties that come along with these inverted slopes. And although you will have seen this first one before, it gets interesting from there. So let's just do it and see. So no matter how many times you look, and how many times you check, and how many times you inspect, you will miss something, or multiple somethings. I'm sure that's not the last one. All right, my friends, this is where we're going to wrap things up, and it's going to get more than a little epic. So I don't know quite how much of this I will keep in the final product. And I don't know if there's much to say about what I'm about to do other than just let you see it. But I think it is 100% worthwhile, and it's going to take some wrestling on my part. So, but I think you'll get it once we're there. So here we go. We made it to the halfway point. If I've done my counting correctly, we are at 40 layers, and we're going to get up to 80. And I'm trying my best to keep the labored breathing off of the recordings, but it's hard. If you've ever tried to build up one of these kind of vertical cylinders out of Lego, it's really just muscle. Like, you got to line things up and then force them down. So it's physically a little challenging. And don't think my heavy breathing is part of the aesthetic. So, taking a break, give you a glimpse of the halfway point, and we'll keep going. Okay, that was hard, but worth it. Okay, final thoughts on this majestic monster. I don't even quite know what to say. This thing is crazy. And what's crazy about it is that it's the same old Lego circle that I have literally built 1,000 times. But when you use these particular bricks, these 2x2 inverted slopes, and you offset them with different chiralities, so some are sticking out, some are sticking in, it just reveals this whole crazy geometric world that's just kind of baked into that very simple staggered pattern. And just this long, endless series of helices. It's just crazy and beautiful and wonderful and awesome. So it is safe to say there are more Lego circles in my future. And it's safe to say that there are other crazy things that you can do with these bricks that I just haven't figured out yet. But for now, I'm going to put this baby to rest. So, as always, thanks my friends, and I'll catch you next time.